shots from Benítez's forehead. And there was Benítez scoring.
Ask any boxing fan who could take down Wilfred Benítez, and you'll get the same answer. No one. The youngest world champion in history seemed untouchable, a man whose reflexes made him a ghost in the ring. But behind the gloves and glory, there was one fight he could never dodge. It wasn't a title match. It wasn't even in the ring. And when you hear what it was, you'll understand why Benítez calls it the toughest battle of his life. Wilfred Benítez's name would always be remembered in boxing history for one reason above all: his talent that seemed to be something he was born with matured faster than anyone expected. Born on September 12, 1958, in New York City, but raised in Puerto Rico, he grew up surrounded by the sport. His father and brothers all boxed, and by the time Benítez was a teenager, his skill was already attracting serious attention from trainers and promoters. He was known for his reflexes, defensive awareness. He was equally regarded for his uncanny ability to read an opponent's moves before they even committed to them. What set Benítez apart from the beginning was how young he reached the top. In 1976, at just 17 years old, he became the youngest world champion in boxing history by defeating Antonio Cervantes for the WBA light welterweight title. The record still stands. Many fighters spend years refining their craft before reaching a title shot, but Benítez's rise was almost immediate. He had a calmness in the ring that was rare for a teenager. Instead of rushing in with raw aggression, he would stand his ground, wait for his chance, and pick his shots with perfect precision. Benítez wasn't just a one-division wonder. After conquering the light welterweight category, he moved up to welterweight and claimed the WBC title in 1979. This proved he could adapt, adjust his style, and still dominate. In 1981, he stepped up again and won the WBC light middleweight title, making him a three-division world champion before the age of 23. This achievement placed him among an elite group of fighters who had shown they could succeed across multiple divisions. Inside the ring, Benítez was a master of defense. His nickname, the Radar, came from his ability to slip punches and make opponents miss by the smallest margin. He could fight aggressively when needed, but his real gift was controlling the pace, frustrating attackers, and countering with pinpoint accuracy. He wasn't a heavy-handed knockout artist, but his precision and timing made his punches effective and his style extremely difficult to solve. Benítez fought during one of boxing's most competitive eras. The late 1970s and early 1980s were packed with top-level fighters, and his willingness to step into the ring against the best defined his legacy as much as his titles did. His matches were often technical showcases rather than just boxing. Fans could see the subtleties of high-level boxing. Benítez's career saw its share of challenges, including the physical toll that comes with years in the sport. But his early achievements remain almost unmatched. Few fighters in history have won 3 world titles in different weight classes before the age of 25, and even fewer have done it with the same level of composure and ring IQ. In boxing history, Wilfred Benítez stands out not just for his youth, but for the way he carried himself in the ring. He is calculated, fearless, and always a step ahead of whoever was standing in front of him. But still, one opponent got Benítez's heart racing each time he set his eyes on him. Who was this person, and what got Benítez worked up about him? Let's dive into this mind-blowing revelation: the tough opponent. Wilfred Benítez entered the ring on November 30, 1979, as one of boxing's brightest young champions. At just 21 years old, he had already claimed world titles in 2 different weight classes and built a reputation for defensive skills few could match. That night, under the bright lights of Caesar's Palace in Las Vegas, he defended his WBC welterweight crown against a challenger who was quickly becoming one of the sport's biggest stars. His name, Sugar Ray Leonard. The fight itself was billed as a meeting between 2 of the smartest fighters in the division. Leonard was known for his blinding hand speed, slick movement, and ability to adapt on the fly. Benítez was the youngest champion in history. a defensive prodigy who could frustrate even the most dangerous punchers. The clash had all the makings of a classic. From the opening bell, Leonard pressed the action, using his jab to find openings and force Benítez onto the defensive. Benítez, true to his style, stayed composed, slipping punches, countering with sharp rights, and avoiding unnecessary risks. The early rounds were competitive, but Leonard's activity and aggression began to tell. In round 3, Leonard scored the first knockdown of the fight with a well-timed right hand. Benítez got up quickly, showing no sign of panic. But the message was clear. Leonard was capable of breaking through even the tightest defense. Over the middle rounds, the fight became a pattern. Leonard kept pushing forward, using combinations and lateral movement to prevent Benítez from doing his usual. Benítez had his moments, landing precise counters that reminded everyone why he was champion. Still, Leonard's work rate and versatility kept him in control. Then, in the closing moments of the 15th and final round, Leonard landed another right hand that put Benítez down again. This time, the referee stepped in and stopped the fight with just 6 seconds remaining. This loss must have felt like a blow to Benítez. And how did Benítez handle that? In the days that followed, Benítez was not one to dwell on the loss publicly. He had never been a talkative figure with the press, and his post-fight comments were brief. According to boxing archives from that period, he acknowledged Leonard's speed and skill, reportedly describing him as very fast and smart. It was a short but telling remark, consistent with the way Benítez approached the media throughout his career. He focused on tactical observations rather than dramatic narratives. That fight marked the end of Benítez's first reign as WBC welterweight champion, but it did not derail his career. He moved forward, continuing to chase big fights and world titles. Less than 2 years later, in May 1981, he stepped into the ring with British champion Maurice Hope for the WBC light middleweight title. This time, Benítez delivered one of the defining performances of his career. His defensive mastery was on full display, making Hope miss repeatedly and using counterpunches to sap his energy. Benítez would reveal that his was his plan all along, to make Maurice miss and tire him out. It was a simple but effective strategy that worked perfectly. In the 12th round, Benítez closed the show with a powerful right hand that ended the fight, making him the youngest 3-division champion in boxing history at just 22 years old. That same year, Benítez accepted another major challenge, Thomas "Hitman" Hearns. Scheduled for December 1981, the bout pitted Benítez's defense and ring IQ against Hearns's height, reach, and devastating punching power. In the lead-up to the fight, Benítez made it clear he respected Hearns's knockout ability. Boxing historians note that he spoke about relying on his defensive skills to neutralize Hearns's aggression. Once the fight began, it became a battle of styles. Hearns used his jab to control distance. Benítez threw punches and looked for counters. The match went the full 15 rounds, with Hearns winning by a unanimous decision. Afterward, Benítez's assessment was characteristically understated. Hearns's height and jab had made the fight a difficult one. Though there was no elaborate breakdown, he acknowledged the challenges he faced. The 1980s also saw Benítez share the ring with another legendary figure, Roberto Duran. By then, Benítez had solidified his place as one of the most technically sound boxers in the sport. Against Duran, he again relied on the defensive approach that had brought him success for years. His style wasn't built on overpowering opponents, but on making them miss, controlling the pace, and capitalizing on mistakes. These tactics had been consistent throughout his career and were a core reason why elite fighters respected him so much. What made Benítez unique wasn't just his ability to win world titles across multiple divisions, but the way he did it. He rarely sought the spotlight outside the ring. In interviews, when he spoke at all, his focus was on boxing strategy. He was on and about who had a strong jab, who was quick on their feet, who had the kind of power that needed special preparation. This approach meant his comments were often short, direct, and to the point, but always rooted in his deep understanding of the sport. By the mid-1980s, the wear and tear of an early start in professional boxing began to show. Benítez had turned pro at just 15, meaning that by his mid-20s, he had already been competing at the highest level for a decade. However, as time flew by, training discipline became an issue, and his performances grew inconsistent. Losses to fighters he might have handled easily in his prime began to appear on his record. Eventually, his career slowed, and he retired in the early 1990s. Looking back, the 1979 fight with Sugar Ray Leonard remains one of the most important moments in Benítez's career. This is not because it was his best performance or his biggest win, but because it showcased him on one of boxing's largest stages against a fellow elite fighter in his prime. Benítez's ability to stay competitive for 15 rounds with someone of Leonard's caliber, scoring counters and frustrating him at times, reinforced his reputation as a defensive master. His brief but respectful post-fight comment about Leonard's speed and intelligence summed up the mutual recognition between two great fighters. The bouts with Hearns, Hope, and Duran further illustrated his adaptability. Against Hope, he demonstrated how patience and counterpunching could dismantle a champion. Against Hearns, he proved he could survive and compete with one of the hardest punchers in the sport, even if the decision didn't go his way. Against Duran, he reminded fans of his ability to control the rhythm of a fight against an aggressive opponent. Wilfred Benítez's career is often remembered for his youth, his defensive wizardry, and the way he carried himself in and out of the ring. He was a fighter who let his performances speak louder than his words. The remarks he did make about Leonard's quickness, Hearns' reach, and Hope's need to be worn down did offer small but valuable insights into how one of boxing's greatest natural talents viewed the sport. But as talented as he was, how did others view him? Let's find out. The scary boxer. When people talk about Wilfred Benítez, they often start with his age. The youngest world champion in boxing history at just 17. But when fighters who actually shared the ring with him talk about him, the conversation changes. They don't just mention his youth. They talk about how hard it was to hit him, how frustrating it was to figure him out, and how mentally exhausting it was to fight him. One of the clearest examples comes from Sugar Ray Leonard. After their 1979 WBC welterweight title fight, the one that ended in a 15th round stoppage in Leonard's favor, Leonard admitted that the experience was unlike almost anything he'd faced before. "I've never missed so many punches in my life," Leonard said. He was one of the sharpest and most accurate punchers of his era, and yet, on that night, Benítez forced him to swing and miss over and over again. Leonard went further, calling Benítez one of his toughest opponents. It wasn't because of raw power or relentless pressure. It was because of defense. The slick, frustrating kind that made you second-guess yourself. Leonard pointed out Benítez's quick reflexes and his uncanny ability to slip punches at the last second. Sometimes, Leonard would throw a punch, convinced it was about to land, only to find that Benítez had already moved his head or shifted his stance just enough to avoid it. Leonard even said it felt like he was chasing a ghost at times, a fighter who was there in front of you but impossible to catch cleanly. This wasn't just flattery after a hard fight. Leonard's frustration was real. Benítez's defensive skill forced Leonard to adapt his game plan throughout the fight. He had to increase his work rate, throw more combinations, and keep mixing up his attacks because the first clean shot rarely came. It's the kind of tactical puzzle that wears you down mentally, and Leonard's words after the fight showed just how much he respected what Benítez brought into the ring. So if you think Leonard was flattering him, think again, because Leonard wasn't alone. Leonard wasn't the only elite fighter to struggle with that puzzle. In 1981, Benítez faced Thomas "Hitman" Hearns, one of the most dangerous punchers in boxing history. Hearns stood over 6 feet tall, had a reach advantage over almost everyone, and carried knockout power in both hands. Yet after 15 rounds with Benítez, Hearns described an experience that echoed Leonard's. He said it was difficult to land clean shots because Benítez always seemed to know where the punch was coming from. This statement says a lot. Hearns built his career on catching opponents before they could react, using his long jab to set up straight rights and hooks that ended fights early. Against most fighters, that worked. Against Benítez, it didn't. The Puerto Rican champion read Hearns' attacks in advance, making small adjustments that threw off the hitman's timing. Hearns still won a unanimous decision, but his comments after the fight showed that Benítez had taken away his usual comfort zone. When a fighter like Hearns, who relied on accuracy and range to do damage, can't find the target consistently, it means something is working defensively. Even fighters who never faced Benítez in an official bout knew what he was capable of. Roberto Duran never fought him professionally, but the two were in the same circles during the late 1970s and early 1980s. They sparred, and those sessions left an impression. Duran reportedly called Benítez tricky and difficult to hit cleanly. For someone like Duran, known for aggressive pressure and inside fighting, that kind of acknowledgement meant a lot. Duran thrived on breaking opponents down up close, but Benítez's skill in avoiding damage, even in sparring, was something the Panamanian legend didn't overlook. Duran's camp shared similar views, noting that Benítez's defensive style would have been a potential problem had they ever fought in a sanctioned match. Duran wasn't intimidated by many opponents, but he respected craft, and Benítez's craft was undeniable. Even without an official fight between them, there was mutual recognition that the matchup would have been a chess game more than a slugfest. Benítez's reputation wasn't built solely on the words of big-name champions. Analysts, trainers, and other fighters of the era often used one particular word to describe him: scary. Not in the sense of raw power, but in the sense of unpredictability. You never knew what angle his counterpunch would come from. You never knew which way he'd slip or pivot. He could stand right in front of you, within punching range, and somehow avoid damage entirely. That ability earned him the nickname El Radar. The name fits perfectly. It was as if he had a built-in system for tracking and reading every move his opponent made. His defensive awareness was so sharp that he often reacted before the punch was fully committed. For fighters who depended on setting traps or landing clean combinations, that was maddening. Maurice Hope, the man Benítez beat in 1981 to become a 3-division champion, knew that feeling well. In their fight, Hope tried to pressure Benítez and force exchanges, but time and again, his punches either missed entirely or were blocked with minimal effort. Hope reportedly found Benítez's style infuriating. He could throw, miss, and get countered all in the same sequence. The mental pressure builds fast, and eventually, it broke the fight wide open for Benítez in the 12th round, when he scored the knockout. Carlos Santos, another skilled Puerto Rican fighter and a former opponent, experienced similar frustration. Santos was known for his technical skills, but against Benítez, those abilities didn't find much success. His combinations were disrupted, his timing thrown off, and his rhythm broken. It was the same story. Benítez made an accomplished fighter look far less effective than usual. The common thread in all these accounts, from Leonard to Hearns, from Duran to Hope, and Santos, is that Benítez's greatness wasn't always clear to casual fans, especially those who only wanted knockouts and toe-to-toe fights. His talent was subtle, built on the smallest defensive movements, the quickest reads, and the ability to counter at just the right time. Those who shared the ring with him understood it immediately. Those watching from the outside only caught glimpses of it unless they knew what to look for. What made his defense so effective was a mix of instinct and intelligence. He didn't run from opponents. Instead, he stayed close enough to land his own shots, but far enough, or angled enough, to make theirs miss. That's why Leonard felt like he was chasing a ghost. That's why Hearns kept missing the target he wanted. That's why Duran remembered him as tricky. And that's why analysts called his style scary. Because it was unpredictable, yet completely under control. Benitez's career had highs and lows, but the respect he earned from these legends remained constant. When champions known for their offense admit that a fighter's defense gave them trouble, it says a lot about the level of skill involved. And when multiple Hall of Famers, fighters with entirely different styles, echo the same sentiment, it becomes clear why Wilfred Benítez is still regarded as one of the most gifted defensive boxers in history. Having accomplished so much in boxing, where's Benítez today? There's still so much to discover. Benítez's current life. Wilfred Benítez, who was once called El Radar, has another side to his story as of today. Now 67, Benítez is battling a condition called chronic traumatic encephalopathy, or CTE. This is not just a fancy medical term. It's the price many athletes, especially boxers and football players, pay after years of repeated blows to the head. CTE is a degenerative brain disease, which means it doesn't get better over time. Actually, it gets worse. And for Benítez, the effects have been devastating. He suffers from severe memory loss, often forgetting people, places, and events that were once part of his everyday life. Conversations are a challenge as he sometimes struggles to find the right words or loses his train of thought mid-sentence. His once sharp mind, which could read an opponent's strategy in seconds, now battles confusion and disorientation. Physically, the toll is just as heavy. Simple tasks that most people take for granted, like walking steadily, dressing, eating without assistance, now require help. He no longer lives independently. That's why he stays with his sister in Chicago, who has become his primary caregiver. She manages his daily needs, helps him move around, and provides the emotional support he needs to navigate a condition that is, frankly, unforgiving. This is not a temporary setback or an illness with a clear road to recovery. CTE has no cure. The disease progresses over the years, eroding both mental and physical abilities. For someone who once danced around the ring with lightning reflexes, the contrast couldn't be starker. The man who fought the best of the best in boxing now fights a silent battle with his own mind and body. What makes it even harder is that CTE often robs a person of independence and dignity in a slow, grinding way. There are good days when Benítez is more alert and can share brief moments of conversation or recognition. And then there are bad days when the confusion deepens and the man who was once a boxing superstar becomes quiet, withdrawn, or agitated. Friends, fans, and the boxing community have rallied around him over the years. Fundraisers and benefits have been held to help with his medical expenses and living costs. But despite the love and support, the reality is that Benítez's condition is something that no amount of money or fame can reverse. Yet, in the middle of all this, there's resilience. Even if CTE has changed his life forever, Benítez is still fighting in his own way. Only that this isn't in or around the ring. It's about making it through each day with the help of family, cherishing whatever moments of clarity come, and holding on to the love of those who refuse to let him fade away completely. For fans who remember the teenage prodigy with lightning-fast reflexes, it's heartbreaking to see where the years have led. But for those who truly know Benítez, the fact that he's still here, still pushing through the hardest fight of his life, is a proof that the same grit and toughness that made him a champion in the first place hasn't died. What do you think of the way Wilfred Benítez's story turned out? Do you believe it's the price of greatness? Let's know your thoughts in the comments, and please do well to subscribe, share, and like this video. See you in the next one.